Hi, I'm Mike Thomas, technical expert on Indian motorcycles and president of Kiwi Indian Motorcycles and Parts. On this video, we're going to go over the fitment of the chain guard. Now, this doesn't only apply to skirted fender models, some of it will also apply to the open fender models as well. This particular project is going to be a lot of fun. Unfortunately, the customer has gone ahead and painted all the sheet metal, and including his chain guard, and not fitted the chain guard up to the bike first. It's really important to do all your fitting up while everything's in the raw stage. Right now, I mean, he's well aware that we may damage, well, we've got a good chance of damaging the paint. I'm going to try and minimize it because we've got to put brackets on it. So there's no brackets on the chain guard, and that's going to pose a major challenge. There's several things you got to watch out for or be aware of or take into consideration or do when you are fitting a chain guard to a bike. Now, they're matched to each bike. It's a simple thing is how this rear fender is mounted to the chain guard. Now, this one here has actually been mounted incorrectly because the tabs, you can actually see, are on the underside, and they should actually be exposed here. So all that changes the trajectory. The fender's going to rotate some this way or that way. It's just a little amount down here, but it's going to mean a whole bunch where this chain guard comes out over here. So the chain guard has to be centered to the sprocket. This one's got a 24 tooth on it, but you can run up to a 26 tooth sprocket, which means that when you get the bigger sprocket, 25, 26, you have to be centered in that chain guard, meaning this part in here. The other thing you got to watch out for or take into consideration is this recess, this line along here. It's to match this line here. So quite often you've got to grind parts of the chain guard off to get that nice line through, follow that line nicely through there. You want to leave about a 32nd of an inch, so you want to be on this side of the line. I'm going to exaggerate, a 32nd of an inch, because you're going to have paint on the parts. You're going to have paint on here, and you're going to have paint on the chain guard. So that's going to be built up, and you want a little bit of clearance. And how it tucks up into here. The chain guard actually tucks up on the underside here. Does not fit on the outside like you'll see on some bikes. That is incorrect. It actually tucks up on the inside. So this part here is going to be on the inside of the fender. The other really important thing is, okay, you got it, it's going to be centered here to the main shaft or the sprocket, but it can't be too far in, meaning this way. Otherwise, it's going to run into the main shaft, and it can't be too far out because you've got a header pipe that comes down here. So if you're too far out, it's going to run into the header. So what I found ideally is something like this. This is actually a sprinkler lid you can get from your hardware store. And it's 6 inches. To get something that's 6 inches, you can cut it out of a piece of plywood if you want to, and drill a 3/4 inch hole in the middle. That's the size of the shaft is 3/4, and then it's going to be the same shape there. So if you're going to go with that, you can't go wrong. And set that on there like so, and you want to put to give you some sort of gauge how far to go on the inside or how far to go in. Just screw the nut on the end and leave it about, if you want to go around 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch from flush from here. So you want to be on the out here, I would say 3/16 of an inch. That way you got clearance in here. Now, if you've got any of this off, just make sure when you put this nut on, you either use a lock washer or blue Loctite. You have to. If you're just going to do it up tight, that thing's going to come off. if you look at some people's chain guards, from the outside, there's going to be a burn mark or a mark that'll be on the outside of this. And that's because that nut has come loose. So just make sure when you put everything back on that this is Loctited on, blue Loctite. So here we've got a nice painted chain guard, and we do not have any mounting brackets. We should have a mounting bracket here and a mounting bracket here. So here we go. Normally your fender or mudguard, if you're from down under, is going to have studs, 3 studs sticking out from here. This one, for whatever reason, doesn't, which in our case, it's actually going to make it a little bit easier for fitment. It's just putting it all on is going to be a bitch because you got to stick your hand up under here and deal with it. But in this case, we've got some fudge factor. We can deal with that. Normally, you'd have to slot the holes here, but since everything's painted, by not having studs is allowing me to slot the holes in here where it's going to be hidden because the chain guard's going to go over the top of it. Since this goes on the underside or it's going to tuck in under here, just put a bit of masking tape on it just to try and minimize any scratches, paint chips, and stuff like that. So we'll go ahead and fit her on. I've got the chain guard sitting in place. Nothing's tightened because we want a bit of a fudge factor so we can tweak things around with our gaps. Unfortunately, this gap you can actually see is uneven. Goes tight up there and comes down and gets tight down here. Whenever I'm doing it, when it's in bare steel, I would actually come back once you get everything centered up here and work and make the gap even all the way along. It's just a finished thing that just looks more professional. And you've got your blue masking tape, and you see how the chain guard actually tucks away underneath. It tucks underneath the rear fender, rear mudguard. I like to use, in this case, fitting up, you can actually see it's a very small diameter washer. That's this one here. It's called an AN washer. This is your SAE washer. Don't ever use a USS washer. That's the big fat diameter one. That's used in construction. You want to use an SAE. For fitting, I always like to use the AN. It's nice and small. Actually, and even when it's finished, I still like to use an AN. And if you do cock something up, what you can do is you can come back and use your standard AN washer over there. So, you know, if you do chip the paint a little bit under there, well, during your fitting operation. But I like AN washers. They go under the nut. Now, in this case, we have to use bolts that come from the inside. Use fine threaded. On Indians, you're using fine threaded. Only when it goes into a casting is it coarse. Coarse threads are used in construction and Harley Davidsons. You do not use them on Indians. I hate it when I pull a Indian apart and somebody's used coarse bolts. That's what's commonly you're going to find at your Home Depot, Lowe's, hardware store, whatever. Now, that's for construction and Harley Davidson. So just use, please just use fine threaded bolts. Unfortunately, the guy has cut some area off here, but this press piece here should actually come over here and then rest on this hole. And normally you'd have to locate that hole and drill it in the cover, but unfortunately we do not have that on here, and that's actually an important part to brace things. Maybe afterwards we can put a little bracket to go from here and capture one of these holes here. These 3 holes shouldn't be in there. Normally it's just 2 slotted holes. So we can maybe utilize one of those. We'll see with the exhaust on and see what's hidden and what we can do. So we've got the chain guard on, it's pushed all the way in, it's right up against the nut on the end of the main shaft. So we're looking pretty good the best we can through here. Just for now, we're using hex nuts. It's nice to have acorn nuts. Well, that'll be on the final part of it, but right now we're fitting everything. This is the bracket. It's got to go on the underside, and it captures, I don't know if you can get that stud, a little hard to see. But anyway, it's a stud back there. It's going to sit like so, under there. And then the top one is going to sit like so, and it's going to mount to that, this top of the transmission boss right there, like so. We'll have a go without doing any damage to the paint. Just to clarify that I like to use AN washers under the nuts. That's the small diameter ones. So if you got to egg out any of these holes and you need to cover it up, you can use an SAE washer. You see it's large diameter. So that's actually going to cover more of the if you got to slot them and if you need to cover it up. The bottom bracket is going to go this way. Going to sit down under like so and catch the bottom of the tranny mount. Put the transmission stud down there. And this one up here sits like so. You can actually see it doesn't actually, if we sit it there, we're in a bit of a, it doesn't line up with the same angle as a chain guard. So what we'll do is we'll tweak this bracket so it's going to be in line with the contour of the chain guard. Here you can see why you can't come out too far. Otherwise you run into the exhaust pipe, the header. So you want a bit of a gap between the chain guard and the exhaust, and that's all part of the fitting up when you're putting on this top bracket. So there's a lot going on. Just take your time, just stop, fit things up. You're fine taking things on and off a few times. If you're going to put your exhaust on, put duct tape, put masking tape down first on here, and then put duct tape over the top of it. The duct tape's got a lot of strong adhesive. If you've got a questionable paint job, it'll pull it off, where the masking tape is real easy. It peels off real easy. So put the masking tape down first, and then put the duct tape on it over the top. Put the kickstart gear on, and we're going to make sure it's got clearance on the inside of the chain guard. Put some washers in behind here, because you want this little pinion gear to bottom out, and push this gear on all the way. And still have it sticking off about 1/8 of an inch here, 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch. And one of the things you want to do earlier on in the game, before you start fitting the chain guard, if you got a painted one like in this case, is put some masking tape and duct tape on some of these areas around here. It's easy enough to have an oops, so it just helps you out in that department. So mark the hole with a scriber or a pen. I like a scriber because it's pointed and it's going to give us a very accurate marking of where it's going to be. Go around the hole just lightly, and that's going to leave a line on our masking tape. If it's bare steel, you're going to do it harder so you can identify it. In this case, this one here is hanging part way over. There's nothing I can do on that. We may, I think we'll fill that one in and then move this one over. So we're actually getting two into the top part of the chain guard. So mount the header on before you put the brackets on, and just make sure you got clearance between the header and the chain guard, which we do. There's actually more there than what it appears to, and that's only just because of the duct tape on there. But remember to put your masking tape down first, your duct tape on top, and it'll be easy to come off. Tweak this bracket, so it's going to be the same as this. We'll pull the duct tape off. We'll actually use the blue masking tape as a, we'll be able to scribe our rivet holes in there. We'll just do one at a time. You put one in and get it sort of nipped up on the riveting process, and then go to the other one. I put one rivet in, welded up the hole on the other side. We're going to re-drill that. And the other thing just to make sure is with a Kickstarter all the way out, meaning out this way, you know, up against the snap ring and the retainer ring, that when you kick the bike over, that this Kickstarter has clearance all the way in here, because that's the other thing you got to watch out for, which comes into play of how much this might be spaced out. And this bottom one here as well, you might have to pull it out when you mount it. So just make sure on your Kickstarter you got clearance when the quadrant's all the way at the top. So through this part up here. And when you put this rivet in, just do it enough that it nips it down so it's not wobbling all over the place. So you just got a little bit of friction on it, so it's going to be held into place. Now that we've got everything okayed, we can go and drill a new hole here and then put a rivet in the second one. There you've got the riveting done. Riveting is done with a ball peen hammer, and it's a series of a lot of little taps going around. Just take your time. It's not going to be a fast thing. You don't give it a couple of big belts and then the rivet's down. I mean, riveting's a whole bunch of series of little taps going around, just in you're mushrooming the head over and you're clamping everything down. Just take your time and it'll work out good. Riveting's super strong. You can't put a bolt and nut through because you don't have much clearance in here, you know, between the sprocket and chain. So that's why you're riveting. Riveting's super strong. Make sure the head is sitting down flush up against the tab. So what's happening is it's clamping everything down nice and tight. And it's not going to vibrate loose. It's not going to come loose at all. So just take your time, do it all properly. Put one in first, nip it down, and then go and test it on your bike, come back, and then put the second one in. Just double check everything, take your time, go backwards and forwards, it's no big deal. You're better off to put the effort into it now and, you know, it's a bit extra time, and that way you don't have to undo a cock up down the road. Now make sure you got the reinforcing plate. If you don't have a reinforcing plate, you can make one out of a piece of sheet metal. That's really important. Likewise on the bottom one. So that reinforcing plate is important. It's going to give it the strength. If you're just going to do it straight on the chain guard sheet metal, it's going to give out. So the strength is by having this reinforcing piece in here. So make sure you're using that. If not, just make one. And do likewise with the bottom bracket here. So, you know, you set it on the bike, you've marked your hole, and you put one hole in and rivet it over until this tab can't move around, just firm enough. Go back to your bike, double check it. In this case, we had to do the same thing as the top one. This hole was too far out, gonna miss it. All this is gonna vary from bike to bike. All Indians, two words that don't go together, all and Indians. So not all Indians fit the same. So once you get this one, so it's all firm, you get the okay on that one, then come back and do the second one. Now when you're riveting, put the head on a piece of wood, but don't use something like pine or some crappy wood like that. You've got to use a hard wood. Like that one there's been beat the hell out of it. So you got to use a good hard wood. I mean, that's pine, that's just absolutely useless. So don't even go that route. Just get a hard wood. And that way, it's not going to mark up the heads. You can use a piece of steel, but the trouble is with a piece of steel, you're going to put flats on here. So by using a piece of hardwood, it'll indent it'll just a little bit conform to the shape of the rivet head, but it's not going to mark it. And there you have it on the underside. Once again, make sure you got a reinforcing plate. That's important. That's what gives it its strength as well. While the chain guard's off, fit the stoplight switch just loosely onto it. Now it has a plate that goes on the back side. It's going to go on the underside. That's what it looks like. Some guys don't realize it's supposed to have it, and they'll use nuts, just regular hex nuts back there, which makes it a real bitch to get at, let alone adjust it and so on. So just make sure you got a plate like this. That way the screws are going through it and this is not going to turn. Just loosely put it on and then just loosely put the stoplight switch onto the chain guard. Don't do the final tightening down yet. And then put your chain guard on. And then you can get your final adjustment here with the spring. What happens is here, there's slots in the chain guard, and this whole mechanism goes forward and back. And that way you can get the right tension on the spring. Sometimes you may have to stretch that spring. You know, they vary from bike to bike. So when you're turning, just test it. You can use your brake pedal up there, but I got it disconnected on this one. So just move the lever backwards and forwards. It's all adjustable here. Stoplight switch wire comes off the bottom stud. So quite often guys put it off here. This one here, the middle one, that's incorrect. I've got several Virgin low mileage original paint bikes between 2,000 and 5,000 miles, and they all come off this bolt stud right here, and you got to clip up the top up here. And while you're putting it on, I hold the Kickstarter down so it's out of the way. One of the things I like to do is fit an AN washer between this clip and the chain guard. So the clip is actually held off the back of the chain guard, off the paint. The reason being is when you put this on, sometimes it'll turn. Now that it's held off, it's not going to scratch your chain guard. Pull the, we had the Kickstarter anchored down before. Let it back up, let it go slowly, and just make sure you got clearance still in the back here. You haven't done the final tightening on your bolts here or down under. That way you got a little bit of a fudge factor to bring it in and out. But just do everything slowly, let the Kickstarter up slowly, and just make sure that you got clearance back here. Kick it through actually, like so you can actually see. So the quadrant's going to go around here. So just make sure it's got clearance on behind here. If it doesn't, you can actually slot this hole in the top of the bracket, and you can actually move that out. Likewise on the bottom one, how it's sitting on the transmission. It's going to be hard to see. There you go. It's actually, you can put spaces between that bracket and the transmission. You can space it out a little bit. That's some little fudge factor you can do But we've gone over through all the fitting properly on this one, so we don't have to worry about that. Well, we better not anyway. Fit your header on. Before you do that, put blue duct tape over the front of the chain guard here. That's going to protect it. Now, when your exhausts vary themselves, the clearance in here is going to vary. I mean, there's so many variables. It varies from bike to bike. It's from exhaust to oils. The exhausts are going to vary a little bit, but there's just so much variation on. It's just a quality of the way the bike was manufactured back in the day. It's no reflection on anything that was, you know, tolerances. So, you know, the exhaust can go on real easy. They can be a real bitch. They can get close to the chain guard. They can be far away from the chain guard. So there's a lot of variables that come into play, but as long as you got clearance, go ahead and put your exhaust system on. Now we've done all the final fitting up to the chain guard. We've got the exhaust system on. Still got clearance between the chain guard and the header. We didn't get any scratches on it. So I would say we've had a very, very successful installation. So there you have it. Just study it all, go through the whole video, go through it step by step, and we've covered everything there. So you'll be all set to go on your chain guard.